Hi everyone, welcome to driver's training, the virtual version. Your instructors have invited me to join you today and talk to you a little bit about auto insurance. And so I wanted to just first and foremost say thank you to your instructors for inviting me, and thank you to the participants here today for allowing me to be able to do this virtually. So I'm going to switch my screen here and I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you, and we are going to get started. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about understanding your auto insurance policy. And my name is Melissa Kreiser. I am an insurance agent with American Family Insurance, and I have offices in New Prague and Lonsdale. And I normally do this live, so this is going to be a first for me. So I can't ask for questions or feedback, but we're just going to go through the PowerPoint slides here. And if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, jot them down. And if you want to hand them in to your instructor after my presentation, I'd be happy to answer those questions that you may have after the class. So first things first, understanding your auto insurance policy. Well, what is insurance? So when I think of insurance, lots of things come to mind. I have health insurance, I have life insurance, I insure my car, my camper, my four-wheeler. We've got old snowmobiles we also insure. And I also insure my house because I want to make sure that if it burns to the ground, that insurance company is going to help me put it back together, right? And so when you think about insurance, I want you to remember the definition. And by definition, insurance helps protect you, the insured, from a financial burden. So the insurance company is the insurer, and the insurance company is going to promise to you in return for a premium. And when I talk about premium, that's just the price that you pay for that insurance policy. When you pay your premium to the insurance company, they're going to promise to help you in the event of a loss or a financial burden. So the examples that we're going to be talking today all have to do with auto insurance. And so we'll talk about things that will come into play, like an animal hit or an accident when you collide with another object or person. And what happens then is you would file an insurance claim with your carrier, and that insurance carrier is going to help you pay for damages to your car or to the other person's car. They will also help you pay for your medical bills. And if it's a bad enough accident, they'll probably even help you pay for lawyers and any legal fees or any court settlements. So insurance is really a good piece of the puzzle to have in your financial planning, because it is going to save you from potential bankruptcy or potentially draining your savings account in those large lawsuit type situations. So on the screen it says, who is responsible for insurance coverage? Well, I would gander that not many of you are 18 years of age or older. So the state of Minnesota says in order to have a binding contract, you do need to be the title holder of the vehicle. And what that means is you have an insurable interest, that you are the sole person responsible for maintaining and insuring that vehicle. And so if that's going to be mom and dad or maybe grandpa and grandma or a guardian right now, then you wouldn't actually be the name on the insurance policy, but rather you would be listed as a driver on that insurance policy. So right now, mom and dad are probably going to be the ones that will take out the insurance policy for your vehicle. And, they may say you have to get a part-time job to help pay for those premiums, but it is going to be in their name to get started. On this slide, I just wanted to mention to you that there are many, many, many insurance options out there. And if you're like me, you're probably zoning into a little bit more TV than normal, but I've seen a lot of insurance commercials lately. And my company, American Family, is up there. I know you probably know Flo down on the bottom, and Mayhem has a bunch of funny commercials, Gecko, State Farm, Travelers, Progressive. There's a whole slew of insurance companies out there. And so what I want you to know is that it's all about your choice. you can do business with someone like me who is a captive agent. I only sell insurance products for the company that I represent, or you can do business with someone online. You can call an 800 number, or you can work with an agent that is independent and may have access to multiple insurance companies, but it's really up to you. Just like where you buy your gas. Do you go to Quick Trip or do you go to Holiday? So this screen is just, a snippet of all of the different insurance carriers out there. And here in Minnesota, we've got, access to a bunch of them. But some of these carriers may be dependent on location as well. So if you ever moved out of the state of Minnesota, you may have to obtain insurance elsewhere if your carrier doesn't particularly do business in that new state. So we've got two types of coverages here, and for today's purposes, I am strictly going to talk about Minnesota state law as it pertains to auto insurance coverage. And the main types that you're going to see, regardless of what state you live in, would be liability coverage, what you would be responsible for in the event of an accident if you caused it, medical coverage, and here in Minnesota, we actually abbreviate that. We call it PIP, which stands for Personal Injury Protection. Collision coverage, comprehensive coverage, roadside service. These are some additional things that you might add on to your insurance policy. And what we'll do is we'll take a deeper dive and look into these individual coverages on the next slides. So here in Minnesota, the state does establish a minimum requirement. Basically what they say is you're driving a vehicle and you're on one of our state roadways, whether that's an interstate, a gravel road, or a street highway, you need to have insurance on that vehicle. Many people choose to exceed the minimum limits that are established by the state. And here in Minnesota, there's 4 coverages that are required. You must have liability, you must have personal injury protection, you must have uninsured motorist and underinsured motorist coverage. So starting off, let's take a look at liability coverage. It is mandatory in most states and it is required by law here in Minnesota. And under the category of liability, there's 2 different types. There's bodily injury and property damage. And you may find that if you are in an automobile accident, you may just damage someone's car. You may not injure the driver or the passengers at all. So that's good. You would only need to pay out of your property damage liability. Now this will cover damage to someone else's property or car if you're at fault. So I say property as a whole because sometimes you may back into something that's not actually a 4-wheeled vehicle. Maybe you are backing out of a friend's driveway and hit their mailbox. Or in your own yard, you're backing up and you hit the stationary basketball hoop. Or you think you're in reverse and you're actually in forward and you go forward and hit the parking curb. So any sort of damage to property that is not yours caused by you would be filed under the property damage liability portion of your insurance policy. Now, what happens if you injure somebody? Well, again, you are responsible. So think of liability as what you would have to take ownership for and what you would be responsible for because of that accident. The bodily injury liability limit on the insurance policy covers passengers, drivers, and others in the vehicle if you are the one deemed at fault. Liability, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, covers things like the bodily injury and property to others, first aid expenses, and in severe court cases, financial and legal obligatory lawsuit settlements. In Minnesota, like I had mentioned on a previous slide, we are required to carry medical coverage. Now, some states do not require this, but as long as you're a resident of Minnesota and you're driving a car in Minnesota that's insured here, you will need to have and include medical coverage on that insurance policy. Now, what this is it's medical care provided to you or to any passengers as a result of a covered accident. And Minnesota is considered a no-fault state. And what that means is regardless of who is at fault, Minnesota says you first need to come to your own insurance policy for up to $20,000 in medical coverage. And I'll give you an example of this. I'm from a town called Alexandria. You probably have heard of it. It's in central Minnesota. And in Minnesota, we've got a lot of 2-lane, 55-mile-an-hour highways. And a few years ago, my parents were driving their car, and it was a Saturday afternoon. The weather was nice. It was in June. They were on their way to graduation parties, and they were heading from one grad party to the next. My dad was driving. My mom was the passenger. At the time, they both had their seatbelts on, and they were traveling west on a 2-lane, 55-mile-an-hour highway. So if you can picture this, they were coming upon their left-hand turn, but the left-hand turn was not at a 4-way stop. They just had to slow down, put their blinker on, and wait for an oncoming car to pass before they could proceed through the left-hand turn. What my dad noticed in the rearview mirror was that the person driving the car behind him was not paying attention. He noticed that his head was down, and he noticed that he was not slowing down, and he told my mom to brace herself because they were about to be rear-ended. And that did happen. My dad couldn't swerve because of the oncoming car, and he just hoped that everything would turn out okay. And it did. However, Mom and Dad were both brought to the emergency room by an ambulance, and both of them filed personal injury claims under their own auto insurance policy. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why would they need to pay from their insurance policy if somebody hit them from behind? Well, it's one of those quirky state laws here in Minnesota that we have to abide by. Since PIP insurance is required, you first file an insurance claim for up to $20,000 in medical bills from your personal insurance policy before you would go to the person that caused the accident. Kind of silly, but that's how the state law works. As you can see on the screen here, ambulance fees, hospital expenses, any doctor services, or even funeral expenses can be covered by your personal injury protection, or PIP. PIP also includes coverage for what's called non-medical coverage. Now, my mom got checked out at the ER. She had some CAT scans, and she ended up wearing one of those neck braces, and she had some ongoing physical therapy. So her medical bills did exceed $20,000. So the person at fault did end up paying a portion through his bodily injury liability. But my mom also missed work. So as you'll see on the screen, there's $20,000 allotted for any non-medical injuries. And so because my mom missed work, she was able to recoup some of her wages that she lost due to those days that she missed because of the accident. Now, I'd like you to note that if you are involved in an automobile accident, you must submit a claim within 6 months for this coverage to apply. Lots of my clients have told me, I feel fine, I'm just a little shook up, and a week or two later, they end up calling and say, I am really sore. I should probably go get checked out, or maybe I should get an adjustment from my chiropractor. And you can certainly do that. Just be mindful that you do need to make these claims within 6 months of that auto accident. So now we're going to move on to the physical damage coverage of your insurance policy. Collision coverage is when you hit something else and your vehicle's damaged. So we already talked about property damage of other people, but what happens when you collide with some other vehicle and now your front bumper is dented? Well, you must elect to have collision coverage on your policy. This is subject to a deductible. Now, normally in class, I would say, raise your hand and tell me what a deductible is, but I can't do that. So the deductible is an amount of money that you have chosen to pay before the insurance company will help kick in the cost. It's sort of like your safety net. So if you can afford to pay $500 first, you would be responsible for that, and the insurance company would pay in addition. This will cover accidental damages caused by the collision or rollover, and any physical damage to your car. Most loans will require that you have physical damage on the car until you've paid off that loan. Comprehensive type coverage is when you have caused damage to your vehicle, but it was an act beyond your control. I call these acts of God. You get a rock chip in your windshield and the glass chips or cracks. A deer jumps out at you and you collide with it. It causes damage, but you didn't know that deer was going to jump out from the ditch. Hail, flood, windstorms, vandalism, theft, fire, and falling objects are also covered insurance claims under the comprehensive coverage on your auto insurance policy. Again, this type of coverage is required when you have a loan through the bank and is subject to a deductible of your choice. Now I'm going to talk about uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. This too is required in most states and is required here in Minnesota. And this falls into play when the person who has hit you or caused the accident and caused you to be injured is breaking the law. The at-fault person does not carry insurance on their vehicle and has no financial backing to help pay for your injuries. Uninsured motorists account for almost 50,000 people in Minnesota. I also wanted to note that underinsured motorists are out there too. These drivers do have insurance, but they only carry the state minimum liability requirements. And in Minnesota, our underinsured motorist coverage has not been increased since the 70s. So the coverage is basically there for you if the other driver doesn't have adequate coverage to cover your medical expenses. On this screen, you can see the liability minimums that are required here in Minnesota for all licensed vehicles. The liability limit is $30,000 or up to $60,000 per accident and up to $10,000 physical damage limit. Now think about this. What vehicle do you typically drive in or ride in? Do your mom or dad, brother or sister, grandpa and grandma have an SUV, a four-door car, a minivan, or maybe a pickup truck? If somebody hit your family's car and caused damage, would $10,000 be enough to repair or replace that vehicle? Something to think about. Uninsured motorist and underinsured motorist coverage, the state minimum requirement is only $25,000 per person, up to $50,000 per accident. Now I can tell you, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've had clients kill people, severely injure, even paralyze people in an automobile accident. They did not try, but as a result of weather conditions, traveling at too high speeds, or just like a chain of events, they have caused severe injury to others. And I can guarantee that if that person who killed someone or paralyzed someone had said, "I'm sorry, I only have $25,000 to pay for your injuries," you probably would find yourself in a lawsuit situation. So on a previous slide, we mentioned that most people do elect to increase these minimal liability requirements. And I've seen upwards of $1 million in coverage on individual insurance policies. And then on the bottom, as we discussed earlier, personal injury protection is up to $40,000, and it's allotted for $20,000 in medical coverage and $20,000 in non-medical coverage. Now I'm going to talk about some extras. These are an a la carte. Think of it like going through the drive-thru. You supersize it, you add dessert, you get an appetizer, that sort of thing. Emergency roadside service is a great add-on, and some people don't need to do this with their insurance policy because they already have a system built into the technology in their vehicle, or maybe they pay for a service similar to AAA or another type of emergency roadside service. This provides towing coverage to your vehicle. If you're stranded on the side of the road, you find yourself in the ditch after snowy conditions, or you need a jump start or tire replacement, etc. Auto rental reimbursement is coverage for a rental car if your car is in the shop. For example, if a deer hits you and you have to take your vehicle to the body shop and the body shop says, yeah, we'd love to help you, but we need to order some parts and we're kind of backed up. It's going to take 10 days for you to get your car back. Is that okay? If it's not, you may want us to pay for you to be in a rental car. Some people decide to loan their car or lease their car. They do this through banks and they make payments. This gap between what a car is worth and what you actually owe on the balance of the loan or the lease is a good thing to protect through the auto lease or loan gap protection available on your auto insurance policy. Gap coverage will basically pay the balance of your loan in the event of a total loss situation. And lastly, I'll just mention accidental death and dismemberment. It's not a life insurance policy, but it's basically a cash benefit in the event someone is severely injured or dies in an auto accident. There's a lot of factors that go into play, and I've only listed a few here. In particular, I know my insurance carrier has 200 different rating variables, and this is how they derive at the price. Age and gender. I can tell you one thing. You are definitely going to be paying a higher price as a teenager who is newly licensed and has no driving experience. And boys, I'm sorry to say, you're going to pay a higher price than the gals. The added coverage we just mentioned, your type of vehicle, the miles that you put on, where you live, all affect your rate. One way that you can help the cost would be look at multiple deductible options and look to add as many discounts as possible. There's a lot out there right now, and many insurance carriers are opting for technology type discounts where you download an app on your phone and it gives the insurance company more of a usage-based report on what you're doing behind the wheel. You can also comparison shop. Like I mentioned earlier, there are a ton of insurance carriers in the market. You can talk to more than one company or more than one agent, ask about those discounts, and please be a safe driver. As of August 2019, it is illegal here in Minnesota to be texting and driving or be on your phone at all. We are a hands-free state, so keep the cell phone down. Also, if you're a good student, typically 3.0 grade point average or higher will qualify you for a good student discount. And also, if you volunteer, make sure to mention that to your insurance company. They may have additional savings that can be had through discounts for volunteering. This is the point in my conversation where I would ask for additional questions. And like I said at the beginning, if you do have questions related to auto insurance or if you have a particular accident you want to chat about, feel free to drop me a line and give that to your teacher. My information is on this slide. You can email me or call my office directly. I want to thank you for your attention, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your driver's training virtual class, and best wishes for safe driving, and I hope you pass your exam the first time. Take care.